Hello and welcome to the 2023 Strengthening Schools Presentations of Learning. We are so glad that you're here with us this evening. My name is Matt Berner and I will be your host for tonight. I'm also joined by my friend and colleague, Kai Sinclair. Kai, if you would like to say hello.
Hey everybody, great to meet you all virtually. Happy to have us here and I'm happy to celebrate these SSP Corps members.
We are so excited that you all are here with us. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to celebrate the hard work of our Corps members and hear about the impact that they've had across Florida. As you all know, our mission is about finding, developing, and supporting a diverse network of leaders who expand opportunities for children. We know that although potential is equal across lines of difference, opportunity is not. And so our mission is to expand opportunities and break down barriers so that all children can maximize their potential. Given that the issue of educational inequity is systemic, in order to make a difference, we need systemic change. The reality is that there's no single way to reach our mission and close the opportunity gap. It takes all of the individuals in our network as both Corps members and alumni discovering their piece of the puzzle. It also takes a different kind of thinking that really attacks the issues at the root and not just at the surface level. It takes building and leveraging the right relationships and persisting through the challenges and the barriers. It's realizing that the issue is multifaceted and that just one small change can manifest into a huge impact. Today, you'll hear the stories of the people who did just that. Through the leadership of our classrooms and within our schools, our Corps members put students on a path to the life of their choosing. We here as staff seek to support and develop Corps members so that they are A, leading our students to achieve more than typical academic growth aligned to key milestones, and also working to strengthen schools where we serve to provide increased access to opportunities for students. Almost all of our Corps members lead extracurriculars at their school, including robotics, tutoring, the arts, academic clubs, sports teams, and more. This pathway challenges second-year Corps members to really strengthen their schools. This is not to say that we did not prioritize student achievement during their second year. All of our Corps members still had a coach from TFA to support their classroom leadership and instruction. But what we did hope to be true is that while achieving outcomes with students, our Strengthening Schools pathway participants could also work intentionally to increase access to opportunities for students. So to give you a little glimpse into where we've been and where we're going, members of the Strengthening Schools pathway engaged in 7 different workshops to build the knowledge, skills, and mindsets to develop and strengthen their initiatives. Over the next few days of presentations, you'll hear about the work that they did, where they landed, and where they will go. Before we jump into our presentations, I want us to anchor in this quote. We often begin with this quote because I understand it's evening time and we could be doing a million different things right now, but I ask you to give yourself the gift of being present. Take the next 10 or 15 seconds to get what you need so that you can be fully present in the moment. Thank you. We do have some virtual agreements for this evening. You are unable to turn on your camera because, of course, in Zoom fashion, I was unable to have you all show your face this evening, so that is okay. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking to prevent background noise. Feel free to use the virtual features, including the chat, as well as the reaction buttons. I saw somebody using a reaction earlier. Be sure to take care of your needs as they come up. Feel free to step away to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And then lastly, stay engaged and make the space work for you. Please try and be present during this time. And I would just like to preview our wonderful presenters for this evening. We'll hear from Amy, Edwin, Jason, Orlando, Shalea, and Tony. Here's our schedule for this evening. As I mentioned, we'll hear from Amy first on Math, the Universal Language, followed by Edwin and Jason, who will be presenting on a lunch period, followed by Orlando, who will present on Homestead Middle Needs Morale. Then we'll have a brief intermission at about 6 o'clock. That will last for 15 minutes. When we return from break, we'll hear from Shalea, who will talk about creating little scientists. And then lastly, to close out the evening, we'll hear from Tony Correa, who will be speaking on the Wellness Initiative. All right, and without further ado, I would like to pass it off to our first presenter, Amy.
Thank you, Matt. I'm gonna share my screen so everyone can see some slides I've put together. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I'll leave time for questions at the end. My goal is to present for about 10 minutes and then do 5 minutes of questions. So just put your questions in at any time and I'll get to them towards the end. All right, so my presentation is called Math, the Universal Language, and I want to start by telling you all a bit about myself and why this issue is so important to me. Okay, when I was 9 years old, my family moved to Jordan, the city of Amman, the country Jordan in the Middle East. Prior to that, I had been living in Virginia, attending school in English. And my parents just told me and my sisters, we're moving to Jordan. We moved there. And because both my parents are teachers, they chose to put us in an Arabic school. They really thought school was going to be the key to fitting in, to belonging, to finding friends, but also really to understanding the place we were living. So they put us in a fully Arabic school, and I started day one of 4th grade, not understanding anything that was going on around me. That was like one of the biggest things I've done, just moving to a new country and starting school in a language I don't speak. And I would say it took about 2 years for me to really know what was happening in school. Arabic is just a very complicated language. But definitely within day one, I was able to make friends and to have fun. And I am so, so glad that my parents put me in this school. And something that really helped me feel like I belong in my school in Amman was math class. So within, honestly, even the first day, like I remember sitting around and having no idea what was happening during science, no idea what was happening during social studies. But as soon as it was math time and the teacher started writing up problems on the board, even though I didn't know the Arabic numerals, I was able to figure them out. Like I was like, oh, if these two things added make that symbol, then this symbol must mean this. And it was like a puzzle. It was really engaging. And then as soon as I went home, I told my dad, can you look up the Arabic numbers and print them out for me? Because tomorrow I want to be able to do math with my class. And math became my favorite hour of the day. I knew exactly when it was going to happen. And I would count down the seconds and count down the minutes, watching the time until we got to math class, because that was the one class where I was like, all right, now I know something. Now I can do something. I'm not just sitting here listening bored. So math has been really important to me since 4th grade. I went on to study business. I took some higher level mathematics classes in university. And then all the jobs I've had afterwards, I've been able to use math through some finances, some accounting classes, like different jobs that use math. Here's some pictures of me later on in school. So the first one was when I first got there. But as you can see, I made a lot of friends in my school and really felt like I belonged there. I attended that school in Jordan from 4th grade all the way through 12th grade. By the time I graduated, that school was home and I spoke Arabic fluently and I was very confident with all my peers. And I really think a lot of that has to do with the way I engaged in my math classes. But what does this have to do with me as a teacher now and in Miami? Well, I had 2 students last year, my first year of teaching at Olinda. I was teaching 4th grade and I had these 2 students, I'll call them I and N, those are their initials. And they reminded me so much of myself. Both I and N were English language learners. Both of them, this was their first year in Miami. And both of them loved math. Within the first week, I could tell they loved math. And they would tell me, when they came in my room, they would light up. And their reading teacher would always tell me, no, they're not very strong students. They're pretty quiet. They're pretty reserved. But in my room, not only were they doing all the work on their notebook, they were calling out answers, they were playing games, they were engaged. And it was almost as if they had like these two different personalities. In math class, they could really feel comfortable in being kids and being around their peers and making friends, and also in doing all the math work that they were required to do. Of course, they didn't understand everything that was happening, but they really wanted to. When I said, open your books to page 65, they would look around and, you know, take out their book because everyone else was. They tried to keep up with all their peers in math class, and they did really, really well. At the beginning of the year, they both tested in kindergarten level on iReady and AP1, but by the end of the year, when we took AP2, they tested in mid-3 and mid-4, so they jumped way up from the beginning of the year to the end of the year in their iReady scores. Then came the end of the year, and I was talking with my principal, and our school admin asked me to predict which students I thought were going to pass the FSA last year. And I was listing off names, and I told them, both of these students, I said, oh, I and N, like, they're both really strong math students. And the school was like, no, we don't really, like, we don't count them as that they're going to pass. And I was like, why is that? Like, they're doing really well in math. And they said, no, like, English language learners don't count for our scores. So when you're adding up numbers, we really want you to focus on the students whose data will count for our school and who can help us, you know, increase the number of students who are passing the FSA. Which is when I realized there's definitely a problem, inequality at our schools that has to do with data and whose scores count and who teachers are being asked to focus on, especially that last month when it's time to review for these standardized tests. I was realizing that data does not count, that data that does not count can reflect students who do not count, and that students get disengaged. When teachers are asked to focus on students who will pass a test and told, okay, these other students, I mean, put them on a computer, like don't have them totally disengaged, but also like, don't be focusing on them because their scores aren't going to count for us. But specifically, I was really bothered by the fact that I and N scores were not going to count, because I knew for sure they would pass the FSA, and they did actually, they both passed. And also because I thought, if we don't focus on them right now, and if they're disengaged already so early on in 4th grade, they're going to stay disengaged, not just in math class, but in school in general. I see how math class changes their perspective on school. I see that they're more excited to come because they like math, even if it's only for a few hours a day. And I really don't want to, you know, not be catering so much to them. So that was last year. I had 2 students that were in this situation. But this year, I have even more students. There are so many more families moving to Florida, moving to the US that are from other countries that are learning English. And so in my class this year, instead of having 2 students who were native Spanish speakers and were learning English for the first year, I had 6. And here's some of their data. These are a lot of numbers, so no need to focus too hard on it. But the one thing I want you to notice is that whether you're looking at the iReady data, which is the first 2 columns, AP1 and AP2, or you're looking at the FAST data, the second 2 columns, FAST1 and FAST2, they all showed growth on both tests. So all 6 of my students who didn't speak English, their scores went up when they took the same kind of test later on in the year. And I think that's very valuable to realize, because they are learning math and they're able to, you know, they're able to improve their own score on a math test from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. This year, I've been focusing a lot on those 6 students. Honestly, I've been very engaged focusing on them, partially because they just remind me a lot of myself, and I want them to like school. I want them to like math, but also because I think their data is really important. I think the fact that they're showing growth means, because first of all, their scores will start counting for our school in 2 years. They just don't count for the first 2 years they're in the US. And by the time they get there, I want them to be proficient, but also because I think students learning is not all about data and scores. So because of the project that I've been working on with SSP, I've been trying to be very structured about the type of support I'm providing to these 6 students. And not only thinking about, okay, what intuitively do I want to do to help them out, but also get their input on it. I have been asking them, what exactly has been helping you learn math this year? What would you want me to do if I was teaching another student in your situation? I've been calling their parents and asking them, like, have you noticed that your child has been really good at math this year? And they're like, yeah, I have. I'm like, what do you think is helping? How else could I help as a teacher? How do you help your child at home? And trying to figure out what are some strategies that are helping these specific students learn math in an English school. So one thing is to teach numbers right away. I had like not only written, but also spoken numbers. Again, most of these students are Spanish speakers, so the numbers aren't totally different, or they're different. They're not so different, but I think that that's just like a good first step. The second thing is to accept answers in Spanish always. I've never, told a student they have to answer something in English, because to me, math is universal. So if they're getting to the right solution, they're getting to the right solution, no matter what the language. And that meant I had to learn Spanish numbers. I didn't know them when I first got here, but I was like, if I want to be able to accept their answers in Spanish, I have to learn how to understand what they're saying. The third point is translating topic assessments. So the good thing is that this year, topic assessments are taken on computers. But one thing I found very quickly is that you're able to translate just on the computer using your right click. You can change the language, and students can translate the questions into Spanish. So for things like word problems, this takes a lot of the burden off the teacher to translate. And it takes a lot of the burden off the students to have to try and figure out what's going on, because they can just read the question in whatever language they want. Since it's digital, it's very easy. Another point is displaying keywords for word problems. So I have anchor charts up in my room that talk about what, take away or lost are the same thing as subtract. I have keywords for divide, keywords for multiply, and I leave those up all the time. Like I don't cover them up for topic assessments, because to me, I think the topic assessments should be measuring how well the students know the math and not how well they understand the reading portion. Another thing I like to do is to give students whiteboards for written answers, so they don't have to say answers out loud. To check in regularly with parents regarding homework, asking the parents, like, what have you noticed your child struggling with homework? Do you know how to do this homework? Do you need help answering this? And then also to hold students to high standards. So again, just because they don't speak English fluently yet does not mean that they're unable to perform the same math tasks as the rest of their peers. Lastly, I've been familiarizing the students in my class who are English language learners with their test accommodations, and working with the Spanish-English dictionary early on in the year, so that when it's time to take standardized testing, they know how to use the dictionary. They know that they have extended time. They know how to translate keywords. And I think, again, that was something that I was surprised the school wasn't doing already, that we knew that there were test accommodations for ESOL students, but they weren't really being used. So that was something I was like their advocate, because to me, I was like, no, I've been in this situation. Like I've sat through a math test in Arabic, and there were some accommodations given to me while I was in Jordan. So I want to make sure my students get the same things. Some great news that I noticed this year was that with even more time, my students from last year, INN, did even better on their test this year. So their iReadies this year, they're in 5th grade, and they scored in mid-5 at the end of the year. And the FAST, the test that they just took, one of them scored a 4. The test is out of 5. One of them scored a 4 out of 5, and the other one scored a 5 out of 5, and actually had the highest math score in the whole grade level, which just made me really, really proud, because it's only his 2nd year in the US, and he's just proving to his classmates that he is, he's great at math. But even more exciting than that to me is that both of these students have friends, they're excited to come to school, they love coming to school, they do their homework. Like school has become a fun place for them. And I think math really did play a role in that, because I see that again with my 6 students this year, that they look forward to math time. Math is like a confidence booster for them. It shows the peers that they're smart and that they're engaged, and that they're not just sitting there drawing pictures and, disengaged and uninterested. So again, I think math is a universal language. I think math is the key for keeping students engaged and excited when they maybe don't understand the rest of the English that's happening all throughout the day. And another thing I've been doing as part of this project is to document my practices in the classroom and share them with other teachers at my school. I will likely not be at Olinda next year, but I want to make sure that these practices continue, because Olinda is now 30% English language learners, and I'm sure that will grow even more in the future. We have a lot of students moving here from Honduras, from Nicaragua, from Costa Rica, and I want to make sure that my fellow teachers also understand what's working for my students, because I think it could work well in their classrooms as well. So I've been meeting with them during lunch breaks and just putting together like some resources on things that I see going really well in my math lessons to share to continue in the future. So this is my project. Again, it's been really a passion of mine. It's something I was doing somewhat unconsciously last year with these 2 students without even noticing, but this year as being part of the SSP program, I was like, oh, I know exactly who I want to work with. I want to work with these students, these 6 students in my classroom. I want to document exactly what's working well, because to me, this could be like, I think it's like the next superpower that our schools could be leveraging, is like working with ESOL students within their first year at getting really, really good at math. And I think it just keeps them engaged and having a good time at school, which is really important for students. So if you have any questions for me about my project, please add them in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing since my slides are over now.
Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your presentation. As Amy shared, it is now time for questions. So feel free to either come off mute or share your questions in the chat.
Thank you for sharing that presentation. That was really well thought out. And I would love more people, specifically people in administration, to, potentially hear stuff like this. It makes me mad too when I hear my students who are, English language learners don't count to focus on other kids instead. I'm like, what do you mean I should focus on other kids instead? So not so much a question, but more like a, yes, it's awesome.
Okay, I see some questions in the chat. So I'm going to start with this one. What support would you want to see from other teachers who don't teach math? Thank you. One thing I did with my co-teacher, actually both my co-teachers last year and this year, the reading teachers have asked me, like, what are things that we should be focusing on with these students? Are there any certain words that they seem to not understand how to use? So again, I think math, I say the universal language, I mean it. I think math is universal. My students can do math in English, they could do math in Spanish, they can do it in whatever language. But I think, for example, reading teachers can help students understand how to read the keywords. They can work on using dictionaries in classes, because I think the accommodations are the same in reading and math. And then another thing I think that's important is like kind of what Orlando was saying, but like holding students to a rigorous standard, even in other subjects. So that was one thing. When I went to school in Arabic, I was the only foreigner in my whole school. And so I had to do every single assignment. Like they made no exceptions for me. They were just like, here's your work, you got to do it. Like find a way to do it or you're failing. And I think one thing I see in our school often is like in a reading class, you'll see students just like sitting with their book closed, and the teacher will say something like, well, they don't really understand what they're reading. Like, well, they should still have it open, like on the correct page. So yeah, because I have students who come in my math class sometimes and I'll like be like, okay, take out your worksheet. And they're like, what? Like, I don't know English. And I'm like, so take out your worksheet. Like you should still. So I think that's something that should be happening in all classes. Let's see. Another question here says, what is the best way to invest others in supporting our ELL students more? I think that's similar. Like I think teachers, we should be holding these students to the same rigor as we do everyone else. I think when we set a high bar, students like rise to it. And then the same thing with homework. Like I make sure they do their homework every day and call their parents if they don't do their homework. And the same thing with behavior. Like whatever I expect of anyone else in my class, I expect of my English language learners as well.
Any final questions for Amy? All right, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your awesome presentation. Let's show Amy some love and appreciation in the chat.
All right, well, go ahead.
I was trying to spotlight both you and Edwin. Oh, cool, I can spotlight both. Okay, awesome. Without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to Jason and Edwin, who will be presenting on a lunch period. Take it away, guys.
Hey, thank you so much. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Let me share this screen here. Okay, Eddie, is it up there on the screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And it's unobstructed. You can see it clearly? Very good.
Yeah, good.
All right. I'll let you go ahead and begin.
Okay, so hello, everybody. I'm Edwin Jean-Baptiste. I am, I guess, TFA alum now. I'm a 7th grade English teacher at Westview K through 8. And this is my colleague, Jason King.
And I work at First Coast High School in Jacksonville. I teach 11th grade English. I've got English 3 Honors, and AP Language and Composition. Most of the students that I discuss today are in my AP class.
Okay, so this is our project. We wanted to talk about a lunch period. So the original idea for this project was expanding a lunch period, and we were thinking about it, and then we changed everything as we started talking to our students and then talking amongst ourselves and then staff at TFA. So the original complaint that we got was lunch is too short, and students didn't like being in the cafeteria. They felt it was too loud, and we kept on getting, Jason and I both kept on getting the question, can we come up to your room to have lunch? So we decided to take this as an opportunity to build equity in our classroom and hopefully in the school. So we believe that the lunch period is overlooked, but we consider it to be one of the most important parts of the day, especially the students consider it to be one of their most important parts in the day. And we think that the current policy treats it as just some mandated break. But we think that this is a huge opportunity for educators to foster relationships and help students express their authentic selves, because we came to the conclusion that students are voluntarily giving us their time. And we wanted to honor that. We wanted to celebrate that.
So what we decided to do with the lunch period is to investigate the margins of pedagogy. And what I mean by that is that lunch is usually not thought of as part of the job of teaching. Typically, I think it's fair to say it's seen as outside the bounds of pedagogy, or as an insubstantial part of the day, seen as something other than the actual work that we do. So we investigated how lunch periods can be used to help our students feel more autonomous in our classrooms, while also feeling a greater sense of belonging. Our results and experiences that we had in both our schools show that lunch periods can help students participating, can help those individual students, as well as helping the classes that those individual students are part of. So I want to tell you a little bit about what the lunch periods were like. And you'll see here on the right, this is a surprise photo taken of me in the midst of lunchtime. And I think I'm telling them to give me back my phone or something. But this is indicative of the kind of relaxed atmosphere we would have, each of us would have in these lunch periods. The lunchtime can free us from the constraints of what is looked at as normal class time. Too little structure in regular class time can result in chaos, but within the context of small to medium group lunch periods, I usually had, on most days, 10 or 12, sometimes less, sometimes more in there. But with these small to medium groups, the lack of structure can engender deep and powerful social connections. These connections can in turn boost academic outcomes. The lunch periods were usually without structure because that allowed for a relaxed setting, more likely to induce sincere and emotionally powerful conversations. When our students feel connections with us, when they feel that we are vulnerable and we are ourselves, they are more likely to express their authentic selves, not only during lunch, but also within contexts more conventionally thought of as academic. Both of us soon realized the potential for boosting test scores and outcomes on other benchmark aligned activities.
Okay, so with TFA, we decided to approach this with the end goal of what will the broader student outcomes be. So I think for Mr. King and myself, we love it when our students express their authentic selves. We believe that we have a lot of personality and our students have so much personality. We love seeing it inside and outside of the classroom. So we also had to bring it back to academics because we are teachers and we wanted students to grow through self-guided small group lessons. And we wanted the teacher to step back and be kind of a facilitator during these lunch sessions. So for myself, the academic goal was to increase Achieve 3000 Lexile levels and then FAST scores for the state. And then for Mr. King, it was for his high school students, he wanted to focus on College Board writing skills for his AP Lang class. And again, we just really wanted to hammer in the point that we want our students to express their authentic selves. By expressing their authentic selves and coming back to regular class period, the students actually aid us in influencing other students to come to our lunch period sessions. And then they also, this has been, I think, a little gem for us as educators because for myself, I struggled with classroom management this year, but my students that came to my lunch sessions, they came back to class and they were helping me out. And I think another beautiful thing with this is that we got to teach outside of the curriculum and have conversation outside of the curriculum. So we were able to talk to students about current political issues, about religious philosophies and equity. And I think that that has been the best part of my second year with TFA. So this is a pie chart just on detailing the students that showed up. So I have 97 students total. And the blue, that's 81% of students that did not come to the lunch session, that decided to stay in the cafeteria and stay with their friends. The orange section, this section is students that consistently came to my lunch sessions. So this is about 15% of my students. And then the gray, that's 4%. So 4% of students that had me last year when I taught 6th grade ELA and journalism, and students that just knew me in the building that just wanted to come peek in and see what's up or say hi or come vent to me about what's going on with their life. And these are our students that came to the classroom during lunch. The top picture, these are one of our self-guided sessions. So one of my students wanted to go read a poem on, I think it was civil rights during this time, and another one of my students wanted to read some Edgar Allan Poe and Shakespeare. And then on the bottom with all the emojis and everything, we put up 3s because our goal was to make a level 3 for the FAST test. And we took a picture to celebrate.
Yes, and you'll see here in the middle, these are 2 of my students, M and A. And they had taken my camera, but I decided, they took some photos here and we were in the midst of a conversation. And it was just one of those conversations where, who knows what we were talking about, but it was a good time. And we had about 10 students in the background behind that who were having a laugh at this whole thing.
Okay, so this is some of my data from the test this year. I pulled data from PM2 and PM3. So if you start if you're looking at the left side, you see target students in class, and these are basically students that admin and myself targeted as having a chance of making a level 3 this year. The next part under the target students is the lunch students. So the students that consistently came to lunch, that consistently came to sit down and have lunch with me. And the bottom one is former students that had me last year, or again, students that just knew about me in the building and wanted to come by. So we're English teachers and we love looking at data, but creating charts is not our forte. So I'm saying that because with my lunch students, we also noticed that some of my lunch students were my target students. And this is not saying that because students came to lunch, they increased their FAST scores. We're not trying to argue that at all. We're just saying that these are the students that increased. So out of the target students, and I'm just reading the data from PMA3 in the gray, there were 5 of my target students that reached a level 5. And then out of my lunch students, there were 8 students that made it up to level 5. So there were a couple of students that were not my target students that just kept on coming to lunch, and I kept on helping them during my lunchtime, that made a level 3, and that surprised myself and admin and the whole team. And then my former students, they stayed consistent at a level 3 for the entire year. And these are our findings to wrap everything up. So we're teaching marginalized communities, and with TFA anti-racist practices, we found that looking at marginalized aspects of our school schedule, we have an opportunity to create a more inclusive space outside of contractual work obligations. And our goal as inclusive educators is our students' broader outcomes. We want to make more well-rounded students to go off into the world. And through these lunch sessions, we found a strategy that worked for us in fighting inequity. We're not saying that every teacher should be rooting, tooting hard, giving up lunch period, and teaching students. We're saying that this is what works for us this year.
Right. And so we both have talked about how there is a need for research on the elements of teaching usually excluded from academic study or marginalized within that context. And we think this is especially true when it comes to the ways that teachers form social connections with their students. Because as our research indicates, these often overlooked moments can strongly influence student learning outcomes. The indirectness of this influence can complicate research, but it should not prevent investigation into these understudied points of pedagogy. Instead of excluding or relegating to tertiary status the significance of aspects such as the lunch period, we should endeavor to discover how traditionally underprivileged phenomena, such as lunch periods, can influence those elements already privileged within the field of education studies, such as, standardized test scores, GPAs, graduation rates, etc. We believe that lunch periods can not only be part of what we do, it can be an integral part of what we do.
So I'm seeing a question in the chat from Ali. So was this an everyday thing? For me, it was not. I think we, as educators, we can admit when we're burnt out, and there were times when I hit the wall, and I had to tell my students no. But I tried to, I'll say, at least 2 to 3 times a week, I would have a student come up during lunch to help them.
Yes, and to answer your question, and excuse me, the dog is going crazy today. She does not like the storm up here in Jacksonville. It's quite a bad storm. But this was an every 8-day thing for me. And like I said, on average, we had about a dozen, sometimes 20 something, sometimes maybe only 6 or 8. And it wasn't just my AP students. I had students coming from other classes. I confess, sometimes students would come, I didn't even teach them. I don't know who they were, but they would come that day and be part of the community. And, they would be in the classroom instead of the cafeteria. And usually the lunch periods went pretty smoothly. We've got a pretty good regular group there in the lunch periods, which I saw today, actually.
Okay, so the next question is, what guidance would you have for teachers who rely on the lunch period to decompress for themselves? Honestly, I'm of the mindset of you have to put yourself first. Because I think what can happen if you're burnt out and if you need the time to decompress, but if you keep on putting more on your plate, is it can be actually, I feel like in some cases it might be more detrimental to students because you might not be able to entertain these conversations that they're wanting to have during lunch. So I would say take the time to decompress. This is really hard work, and I don't think that anybody should feel shame or bad for not taking students up during their lunch period.
Yeah, I want to second that. I agree very much. I think that this is a strategy, and I'm sorry, you all. It looks like I'm about to be absorbed up into the heavens or something with this light. But yes, I agree with what Eddie said. I think that, hey, for some teachers, if you want to figure out how can you have students in for the lunch period and how can you maximize that so that student outcomes are better, here's our research. Here's what we've done. We hope that we've given you some helpful advice. But for other teachers, you know, that lunch period is a time to, hey, decompress, be by themselves, and that's part of their process. We're not saying that every teacher should do this. We're not saying this is a mandatory part of pedagogy, but we're saying, hey, you know, this is an overlooked area of the job, and we think that if you are willing to have students during your lunch period, we think it can be a very powerful time of the day.
Any final questions for Jason and Edwin? Give my teacher wait time. Awesome. Thank you so much to you both. Let's give it up for Edwin and Jason in the chat. I definitely just want to echo the fact that I feel like it's even more amazing that you all took your own lunch period to give back to students. I was always hiding in my room during lunch, so I give you all props for that.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, and that's all right too. Nothing wrong with that.
We have to do it too some days.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Let's transition over to Orlando, who will be sharing on Homestead Middle Needs Morale. And as soon as I get these spotlights up. All right, Orlando, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. It seems to have moved to my second monitor, so apologies, my face looks like I'm going to the other direction. Hi, my name is Orlando Ramirez. I am a second-year TFA Corps member at Homestead Middle School, and in my 2 years at that school, I've noticed something, right? A severe lack of morale amongst teachers, the educators in the building. And I do apologize if the slides seem a little bland. I'm a very cut and dry sort of teacher, you know, and sometimes to the chagrin of my students. So let me press the little enter button. So here's the idea behind my project. It's hard enough working at a school, right? The hours are long, the job is often thankless, unrewarding at times, and the pay, let's not talk about the pay. It's not nearly enough. And in certain schools that we serve, this kind of forms the backbone of the low teacher retention rates. You know, people talk about all the time, oh, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to a different school. I'm going somewhere where the pay is better. I've seen it at my school. I've seen teachers not lasting the full year, teachers not returning after 1 year, and so on. This isn't only an issue because of the culture that this environment serves, but also the effect that high teacher turnover has on the students we serve, right? When a teacher leaves, the students take notice. They see it, right? They're like, oh, all the teachers in the school are dropping like flies. They probably don't care about us here at all. But we often know that that's not necessarily the case. But at worst, this does lead to a problem the relationship students build with their teachers, and it also disrupts their academic support systems. For many of our kids, sadly as it is, we may be their only form of academic support, especially for the low-income students that we serve who are, in poverty and in other such forms of economic turmoil. Turnover is a problem. The problem is, how do you fix it as a teacher? Because a lot of these problems, pay, hours, the job feeling thankless, is something that as a sole educator, you have very little control over. So it seems like an impossible question. How can one teacher fix what years of policy and culture have created? So here's where my idea comes in. I understand that many aspects of education policy have created this system in which the turnover rate is an issue, and that policy changes are needed for it to truly change for the better. But as educators, we can't really just wait around for the policymakers to wake up and be like, this is a problem, let's fix it. Because let's admit, they probably won't, right? So what does that lead us to do? We have to help each other as fellow educators. I was inspired by a teacher at my school, the fabulous Miss Curry, and her club, the Superhero Squad. The interesting thing about this club is it's not a club for students. It's in fact a club for the teachers. What she does is she offers a space to support teachers and celebrate their accomplishments, little things too, like celebrating their birthday, make them feel special. From my background in psychology, I'm like, yes, let's leverage this and use it as a way to help with the morale issue at my school. It's strange what a little bit of a positive support system can really do to people. Now, I know that I won't be able to stop people from leaving my building, and I don't want to. If something's taking them somewhere else, that's where their journey is taking them. But what I do want is to foster this positive support system in my school and hopefully expand it, right? As teachers come and see this positive environment where teachers can relax and meet with each other. It's once a month, not too often, right? They can take it to other schools where they go to as well. So if teachers feel supported from their fellow teachers and they feel more confident, the idea also rings that students will see that. You hear it all the time. Mr., I didn't know that you talked to so-and-so. Mr., I didn't know that you knew so-and-so, referring to other teachers. And I've seen in my personal experience, children take that and be like, if Mr. Ramirez is buddy, talking to my history teacher, maybe I should be, less mean, less abrasive to other students in my class. I know them a lot more. Barriers. So at a macro level, that's a big scale. The many current policies in play make the practice of addressing teacher burnout very difficult. And it's something that I'm unable to address. I can't address those big macro type events. What I can do is address things on the micro level. There are plenty of things that we as individuals can do to mitigate the effects of teacher burnout. However, these are not without their own barriers. At my school and others like it, teachers rarely find time to interact with each other, especially if you've taken up, the 7th period supplement, you got one planning period. Ooh, it's hard to find time to meet with other teachers and discuss things that need to be discussed, especially between departments. I know plenty of people at my school who don't talk to, let's say, the math department, don't talk to the science department, don't talk to the EBD department. And this, creates that barrier between teachers and leads to teachers feeling unsupported and, most importantly, alone. We don't like that. This feeling aggravates these tensions that we already experience in our class. Another barrier that teachers are not willing to go out of their way to interact with people after school. And I get that too. After my long and hard days, I sometimes just want to go home and relax and decompress. But it's nice to offer that environment where teachers can intermingle, and hang out after school. I found the best way to include these educators is to simply talk about it and not make them make a big commitment, but just be like, hey, we're having the superhero squad meeting this Thursday. Just wanted to, extend the invitation to you. And it's important to not forcibly include them. When we have our after school faculty meetings, you better believe I want to be the first person out the door, but it's something that I chose to do. Oh, that's different. So my vision, my intended outcomes for this project were to help build a healthy environment of support between the teachers and educators at my school. And ideally, what will happen is that teachers will report higher rates of positive feelings and outlooks on their job. My goals are I've already said that. But most importantly, to use these social support systems to help mitigate the factors that lead to burnout and low teacher retention, high teacher leaving, turnover. So now that's all said and done. But as a lot of us in Teach for America know, we are in this sort of job to help students. We dream of a future where students are receiving equitable policies and equitable strategies to help them push out of poverty and other situations that they find themselves in. So how is this going to help the kids? Well, ideally, by increasing the morale of teachers in the workplace, they will suffer less from burnout. And those of us who are teachers in the audience, we know that when we're not feeling burnt out and we have the energy to actually deliver these rigorous activities and lessons with our students, they really do notice the difference. My students have come to be like, wow, mister, you're feeling really good today. Oh, wow, mister, you're feeling pretty bad today, just judging by how I deliver my performance in the classroom. So let's move on to catch up. Strategy. My main strategy for building morale at my school was to leverage my relationships with teachers in the building and encourage them to come to our superhero squad meetings. We have them once a month, usually around the 4th or 3rd Thursday of the month, sometimes Friday. And I had noticed that this year the club was a little bit lacking. Last year, I received notifications almost every month, once a month. And this year they had slowed down. So I went to Miss Curry and I asked her about it. I said, wait, what's going on? And she said that she was also thinking about revitalizing the club and, to push out more meetings. So we worked together and we planned and implemented a meeting last April, and we're going to have the one for May next Thursday. So my mission evolved. I was going to help her revitalize the club in order to help my teachers in my school feel less burnt out. I do understand I'm running a little low on time, so I will continue to the data. Data. From what I noticed from the first club meeting in April, as opposed to in March as opposed to April, is that turnout slowed. There was less teacher turnout, right? In our first meeting, we had about 23 teachers show up. It was a pretty big environment. A lot of people were there. They were having a good time. And the second time around, there were less teachers. The biggest factor I can think of this is that we all know that the April area is when we begin crunch time for our testing season. So I can understand that a lot of teachers chose and opted to, go home when the contractual obligations were done. What I have noticed is, more sort of seen, is that teachers have been spending more time also hanging out after class in the hallway. Previously, our teachers were pretty much just be in their room, doing stuff, grading, lesson planning until 2:45 when the contract says you can go, and they would go. But I had seen a lot more teachers just congregating for, sometimes a couple minutes past that time. And I found that as kind of like a win, because this was something that wasn't really happening earlier in the year. Staff have expressed a desire in attending future meetings that are more frequent / want more opportunities to attend. Sometimes that 3rd Thursday, that 4th Thursday isn't, ideal for everyone. Now, this data is not without its faults. I didn't really have quantitative feedback. I didn't think about taking actual, notes and asking, hey, are you feeling better now after this meeting? Because it didn't seem appropriate at the time. If I were to continue this next year, I would absolutely do that. So, summary. When all is said and done, my goal of reducing teacher burnout, increasing morale, kind of a mixed success, in the sense of my lofty goals of reducing teacher burnout and increasing teacher retention at the school. Short term, I didn't see the biggest increase. I did see some, but it's hard to tell if it was specifically because of the increased initiative of the superhero squad or something else. To truly be able to draw a thoughtful conclusion, it would have to be more of a longitudinal study, which is beyond the scope of this activity, right? For the sake of time, I will choose to end this off here and start accepting questions. Here's some photos from some of our events. And I honestly, I think it's something that'd be pretty easy to implement at other schools, which is why I renamed my project from specifically Homestead School Middle School Needs Morale to, Mission Morale. So next steps for my project would to, plan the next meeting in September or even in August as needed. It's the end of the year, and I think it's important to keep that going for the next year forward. And I do believe that this project should last after my time at the school, due to it also being, part of the work of another veteran teacher at that school. We do not have a PTA at my school. Any further questions? So my next year plans, I'm not staying at my school. I am going to graduate school, but it would be definitely to take this thought process to where I go, and hopefully, keep tabs with my teachers down at Homestead Middle and be like, yo, have you guys been going to the club meetings? How's it going down there? Thank you so much for the questions. I hope you found the presentation thought-provoking and enjoyable.
All right. Thank you so much, Orlando. Let's show some love and appreciation for Orlando and his presentation. Homestead Middle needs morale. Let's show him some love in the chat. All right, everybody, we have come to our intermission. We're right at 6 o'clock Eastern. So we're going to take a brief break up until 6:15 or 15 after the hour if you're calling in from somewhere else. So we will see you back here at 6:15. Welcome back from break. It is my pleasure to introduce our next presenter, which is Shalea Miner, and she will be presenting on creating little scientists. Shalea, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everyone see? Okay.
Yes.
My project was creating little scientists. I decided to do this depiction of a tree because I pretty much built this science fair at my school kind of from the ground up. So I wanted to start at the root of the problem. So when thinking of my school strengthening pathway project plan, I was faced with the question, what practice or policy am I aiming to change? And I immediately thought of science. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. I took a lot of neuroscience and biology courses, worked in a lot of science labs. So something that I'm pretty passionate about. And I noticed once I started teaching in Miami-Dade County, I teach third grade math, science, and social studies. But I noticed after my first year, during my first year, that there was a hyperfixation on reading and mathematics. And science and social studies was pretty much pushed to the back burner. Elementary students are not tested on science until the 5th grade. So from 1st to 4th grade, we're giving a couple pacing guides, kind of a year at a glance. And for mathematics and reading, we're giving pacing guides every single day. So kind of a deficit there. I also was asked, how is this policy or practice perpetuating educational inequity? And primary elementary students are being limited to their exposure in the science content area. As a result, when students are tested on content in the 5th grade, a large deficit is shown in scores. A lot of students, when they get to 5th grade, this is their first time ever seeing any type of science content. The teachers are struggling to teach them, 5 years of content within 10 months. And I believe that it's our responsibility as teachers to, cultivate a generation of scientists, doctors, nurses, people who are passionate about medicine and have that early exposure, because I feel like that's essential to shaping their long-term career goals. While reading and mathematics are the foundation and principles of education, I think that other content areas such as science is extremely important as well. So what I would like to see happen is students continue to succeed in their 5th grade benchmarks, and teachers feel less of a strain. There's a lot of pressure on 5th grade teachers for students to be proficient in science, but when students have never seen any science content, it makes it difficult for those teachers to kind of connect with those students. So here is my vision. So my idea is that students will be exposed to data science, research, cultivation, and independence by way of designing their own experiment. I kind of did a mini test with this with my students from last year. We did little mini science fair experiments in the class and the kids loved it. So this year I wanted to bring that into the entire school. So I wanted students to really work independently, think on their own, cultivate their own ideas, do their own research, do their own analytical skills. And this year I got 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in on this experiment. I wanted students to observe something that they see in the real world and take that and create an experiment about it. So moving upwards, kind of trying to figure out this science fair was definitely a struggle. I would say I've been working on this for about 5 to 6 months now. And I've pretty much been doing it almost all alone. I have leveraged relationships with my administration, but they haven't provided me any monetary funds or any resources. So it's something that I've had to take out of my own pocket or try to get other teachers to donate. I have worked with my science colleagues in 5th grade, and they provided me with some materials. I went around to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classrooms and just pitched the idea to their students and to their children, and they were super forward with the idea. My plan was, since science is not in my weekly schedule, I was literally told by my math coach to substitute my science block for additional math time, which is what I've been doing. But I really felt some type of way about that. And I wanted to ensure that, my students were still getting their science content. So during my planning time that we're given every day, instead of planning during that planning time, I planned at home. And then during my planning time at school, I met with 4th and 5th grade teachers on a weekly basis and their students in small groups. So to kind of see if this science fair would actually work to help increase 5th grade benchmark scores or science scores in general, I did a pre and post test for teachers. And for students, I gave them a guided rubric. So these are the things that I taught them. I taught them the entire scientific method, going all the way from their research and bibliography down to their problem statement, their hypothesis, their procedures. And while this was definitely new for the kids and a little bit advanced for them, they were super excited about it. And since they're still at that early learning fundamental stage, they were super happy about it. So I'm excited to share some of the results that we found from the science fair. So let's start. All right, so first for the pre and post test, I sent this out to teachers via Google Forms, and I asked them in their opinion, what are the most important benefits to students from the science fair? And they said working with mentors, being able to conduct a scientific project, because this is something that the students have never experienced before, learning the scientific method, seeing peers, do their projects and kind of having a little bit of competition, having this student engagement and excitement. When you sit in reading class, sometimes you might just sit there, read, answer questions. In math, it's a strict, there's only one right answer. It's a calculation, but with science, it's so much more innovative, creative, fun. You can really get your hands dirty, so to speak, and come up with your own thing and make it you. And I also asked them, in your opinion, what are the most important benefits to teachers? They said less students in class, because during my planning time, I would pull their students out in small group. So that would allow them to focus on their small group while I had another small group in a different room. This also elicited more science instruction for teachers. I did notice that my 5th grade teacher reported to me that ever since I started the science fair, she's been teaching the kids more science, and the kids have been asking her more questions. Like, in Ms. Miner's class, we're learning this, this, and this. How does this apply to what we're doing in our class? And that made me really excited. High proficiency on standardized tests was important to teachers. Improvement in project management skills by the kids, really taking their time, doing their own research, navigating, working together. Obviously, we had some conflict that we had to work out, but I really wanted the kids to just work on their own. They would ask me stuff. I'd be like, I don't know, do your research. I really wanted them to do this on their own. And the last thing that teachers found was that they felt pride for their students. They were really proud of them. They didn't think that 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade would be able to come up with a science project, but they did it. So let's get into my experiments. I'm so excited. So this is my class. So the first experiment that we did was with plants. And so the students had 7 different plants, or I'm sorry, 7 different types of liquid for their plants. But I told them that, everything has to be controlled. We can only have one experimental variable. So we put them in the same location, all had the same amount of soil, all had the same, we used 1 ounce of liquid for each one. The only thing that changed was the different types of liquid. So we had green tea, Coca-Cola, sugar water, regular water, coconut milk, apple cider vinegar, and apple juice. This is what they came up with, okay? And so actually you can see right here that coconut milk was actually growing the fastest. We did this over the course of about 6 weeks. At the 5th week mark, you can see that mold kind of starting to build. This was around week 2 or 3. At week 5, the mold overtook the plant and it completely died. Coca-Cola is here. Coca-Cola actually grew up to 6 centimeters. And I believe that was because of how much sugar is in Coca-Cola, but that ended up dying out as well. And finally, the one that won after 6 weeks was sugar water. So use sugar water to water your plants, guys. All right, the next experiment that we did was sink or float. So the kids built these little boats that they have here. They built them from cardboard, popsicle sticks, paper, hot glue, tape. And then we used 3 different types of liquid. We had apple juice, water, and Coca-Cola to see which one would make it like the boat float the most. And we use these little 90-second timers right here. And after 90 seconds, the Coke boat floated and water and apple juice sank. And we believe that's because of the acidity and the bubbles in Coke kind of kept the boat lifted. And the next project that we did in 3rd grade was this kind of rain cloud experiment where kids see how colors can interact. So they wanted to see absorption, because we learned about absorption, and they wanted to see how the green absorbs, how the yellow absorbs, and then how a mix of the green and the yellow absorb. And they noticed that the darker, more opaque colors absorb more than the lighter colors. And lastly, of course, we had slime. They begged me to do slime, so I said yes. Their scientific question was, will we be able to create slime without the use of borax? And the answer was no, it did not work because borax was the activator for the slime, but they had a lot of fun doing it. Lastly, my 4th and 5th grade, I was only able to do 1 group for 4th and 5th grade since those weren't my students, but theirs were also a little bit more involved. So I had to block out their faces here, but these are my 4th grade boys. They were actually in my class last year. They wanted to do a magnet test. So they used a bunch of different types of metals to see if the magnet would stick to it. So we use the leg of the desk, the sink, and right here what they're testing is aluminum foil. And they believe that because aluminum foil has the word aluminum in it, that the magnet would stick to it, but we found out that it did not, because it does not have the same type of metal properties as steel or brass or something else. And lastly, my 5th graders, they wanted to do an electrical circuit. And this was very involved. We needed a lot of YouTube videos to figure it out, but we finally ended up figuring it out. And the kids were really excited that they were finally able to make that light bulb turn on. So lastly, I wanted to do kind of a pre and post test to see if the science fair has improved standardized assessments. So I asked them a question: have you taken a standardized science assessment in the beginning of the year? The 3rd grade average of their beginning of the year science assessment was a 28%, complete red F. 4th grade had not taken a test, and the 5th grade was at a 35%. And by the end of the year post science fair, 3rd grade was now at a 55% and 5th grade was at a 61%. So for 3rd and 5th grade, we're seeing a 27% and a 26% increase. So I'm really excited about the science fair. I feel like the kids had so much fun. I had a lot of fun, and I hope that we continue to do science in schools. And that is the end of my presentation of Creating Little Scientists. Thank you. I'll take any questions in the chat or come off mute. Okay, I see. How did you engage the kids in creating experiments instead of you providing experiments or them Googling experiments that existed already? So that's a really good question. We did a lot of pre-work. Like I said, the experiment was about 6 weeks. The actual experiment part was only about a week or 2. And the prep was about 3 to 4 weeks. So it was a lot of research, digging into your hypothesis, analyzing your procedures of what exactly you're going to do. a lot of the kids had, a plethora of ideas that they wanted to do, but we kind of had to hone down and say, well, that's not an experiment, that's more of an art project, and things like that. So some of them did Google, like the Rain Cloud group Googled, but most of it, they tried to incorporate their experiment with their own kind of flair on it. Any other questions? Okay, if you or someone else were to make this a year-long project, what would they need to consider? I think a year-long project would definitely allow for more time for the experiments to be even more successful. I think funding is a big issue at my school. We also do not have a PTA, and my administration was not willing to give me any funds for this experiment. So I think starting early on, kind of maybe fundraising, or, if any of the parents are willing to donate, and, push and make sure you have all of the materials that you need, I think that will kind of set precedent for the experiments to follow. It says, I can see so many connections to interest and exposure to future science-related career path. I know it's early, but have you thought about how to continue to grow that? Do you mean science-related career paths for the children or for myself? I think, okay, for the students, I don't know. I mean, I'm just hoping that, they'll always remember Miss Minor's third grade science fair, and, just say that they learn their procedure, they learn their hypothesis. Now they know all the steps to the scientific method, and they really can apply that, into any STEM fields as they grow older when it comes to conducting an experiment, maybe when it comes to writing a research paper, doing the research on it, analyzing it, and then drawing conclusions at the end. I think it's really important for students to build those critical thinking skills at this early age. And as we see, my groups of students were capable of doing it. So I'm really proud of them.
Thank you all for your questions, and thank you so much, Shalaya, for sharing your project. Let's give it up for Shalaya in the chat and show her some love. I could definitely relate to science taking a back burner in elementary school, having also taught math. And so I'm really glad that you were able to bring these science opportunities to your kids. All right. And last but not least, we're going to move on to our final presenter of the night, which is Tony.
Thank you. Yeah, so actually there's a little bit of a technical difficulty. If you could make the other Tony Correa, can I just share? I'm going to share my screen on this one. Okay, this one, because I'm operating from my phone and my laptop. So is that working?
Yeah.
One right now? Okay, so I'm going to try to figure out how to do this. Talk into my phone while looking at my laptop. Okay, so my name's Tony and I do 7th grade ELA at Brownsville Middle. Okay, I'm gonna click that off. For me, really kind of going into this, I started off originally as a wellness initiative, and my bullet points kind of address how that switched to a cultural awareness project that I had my kids do. So with the wellness initiative, that really stemmed from behavioral challenges being kind of front and center at my school. In terms of data, we saw them really making strides. They were on the right path, but between student and teacher, there was this constant adversarial relationship that was really kind of toxic, and I thought was going to be one of the biggest barriers to student success. So the Wellness Initiative started off with a pilot program of arts and crafts, where after school, I, for an hour, would have kids of, whoever wanted to could stop by to the art room, and then we would just paint, color, talk, and I kind of saw this as a way for them to have an outlet for any negative emotions. But even still, I realized that in that program, there were still behavioral challenges. And there was this one conversation that really kind of caused me to switch gears. And it was when a student said, well, what do you expect? We're bad kids at a bad school. And that kind of really struck a chord with me because that was their perception of themselves and also Brownsville. And when you're told that this is, you know, what you are and this is how you're going to behave, why should you stray from that norm? And so how I saw it was that in order to actually get these kids to see, okay, I can make that decision to change my behavior, and I'm not going to let anyone dictate, you know, who I'm going to be. They needed a sense of intrinsic motivation. They needed to be invested in their community, and they needed to see themselves not as bad kids. And they also, more importantly, they needed to see Brownsville as the incredible place that it is. And so my hope was to have my students embark on this journey to foster more relationships with staff and to really have an outside view of their school and the community that is their second family. And so that would all happen with conversations through community and staff. So what I did is I put together basically a handout and a lesson plan, and they were going to work in partners. So I had a set of questions that they were going to ask, and each pair of students was going to choose a faculty member that had been at Brownsville for over 5 years, so that way they could speak to any growth in the community, and also interview a family member. I'm only covering the faculty interviews here because the family ones are a little bit more personal, but basically it was teaching them partnership. It was on them. The onus was on them to schedule time with their interview subjects. So they had to email, okay, if I'm going to interview Miss Dawson, you have to reach out to Miss Dawson and figure out when her planning period is, so that way you can go meet with her. So the questions were asking the faculty member what the role that they hold in Brownsville was, how the culture of Brownsville had changed over time, the biggest challenges faced by the community, and the strides that we could take to overcome them, what the strengths of the communities were, what made Brownsville unique, how Brownsville has responded to recent political and social events. So when they asked me, what do you mean by that? You know, I just kind of looked at them. What has been going on? Like, what are the big things that are happening? And one of them said, Black Lives Matter. One of them said, you know, COVID. So, okay, go ask them, how did the community of Brownsville specifically respond to these events? How the local education system in Brownsville has evolved, and if you believe that the community of Brownsville operates more in fashion of the individual or the collective. And then after recording each other, conducting these interviews, what they had to do for a separate individual assignment was reflect on this statement that there is a difference between a culture that you're born into and a culture that you create for yourself. So the idea of this was to get them to distinguish, yes, when you're born into a situation, that's not within your realm of power to necessarily change. However, your future is in your hands, and you can actively take steps towards creating that culture that you would like to see. And we'll get into the results after this. So I'm not going to play the video. I mean, I can play it for a second, but they just had so much fun with it. This is Mr. Henley, our lead custodian. This is Miss Bethel. This is Miss Dawson. This is Miss Chambers. So that was our, Miss Chambers was our guidance counselor. Miss Bethel is our registrar. Miss Dawson is a reading teacher at Brownsville. And you can just kind of see them get excited from talking to the different adults. And I mean, it made my day getting to watch them and see them be able to work on their speaking skills and interviewing skills. I mean, I don't know if it's gonna work, but my video is awful, but that's kind of, I mean, these just made me really happy to see. And then kind of the takeaways, which will be more of the meat of this, and I'll put my thing here so that way I can focus on one thing at a time. But in the reflection portion, what really stood out to me was them taking ownership of their actions, which I think will really kind of be a breakthrough in their behavior. It's saying, okay, the challenges kind of all across the line that these adults were mentioning were, you know, gang presence in the community, right? Violence, drug usage, and then hearing the adults who, for the most part, all grew up in the community say how they navigated those challenges. I think that was really inspiring for them to hear, because in front of them, you see this successful person that came from Brownsville, right? And they carved that out themselves. And so it created this bond that I don't think may have been there before if they weren't to take the time out of their day to have this conversation. But then they also started detailing things that they could do, right? You know, the culture that you can create for yourself. I can walk away instead of responding. That was a big one. You know, I can practice kindness. I can be more patient. And when I'm angry, I can not take that out on other people. And so those little things, I think identifying those were the first step to seeing any sort of change, because, you know, in my opinion, I could put paintbrushes in their hands and that's going to make them feel really nice and calm for an hour. But if they're not recognizing those emotions and they're not taking ownership on the fact that even though they are children, they are decision makers, then there was never really going to be any progress. And then also having those conversations with, you know, senior community members, it was getting them to feel more pride in Brownsville. I mean, I had one, Janiyah, who was in the previous slide. She said, oh, I never knew Miss Chambers had grown up here, blah, 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 blah. And I love Miss Chambers. Okay, so that's the new role model that Janiyah has now. And she wouldn't have had that if not for this conversation. And it was reframing Brownsville in a way as, and seeing the school of something that they could be proud of. And in order to keep that pride, they needed to add to the school instead of take away. And so that kind of led into my last two bullet points, that they're the future of this place. If there are things that they don't like about Brownsville, guess what? When is that change going to start? Now. And sort of seeing that they actively can work every single day to kind of modify what they don't like about the school environment and also kind of reinforce the parts that they do. And the last bullet point was saying those new relationships. And like I said before, especially towards the end of the year, you kind of see these adversarial relationships where, oh, they're out to get me. These teachers don't care, you know, especially right after testing when it kind of feels like you're breathing down their necks 24/7. I get that tension, but it's kind of stepping away and coming human to human, coming face to face, you know, human and human, to have a real conversation. And I think that when you establish that relationship with a teacher, obviously it's the end of the year, but it shapes how you see the school and it shapes how you see the people in it. And at the end of the day, we spend more time at these schools than our own homes. And so if we can kind of cultivate, like, you know, that love and that family aspect, I think that that can be a huge stepping stone in shaping the culture of Brownsville. So that was that. The end. Any questions? Let me see. Stop share. Okay, I'm looking at myself with two screens on. Okay, so yeah. Next steps. I would really love for them, and what I was thinking about is kind of having a plan for 8th grade and maybe a mentorship program between 8th and 7th graders, because if they kind of have this newfound pride and patience with the school, then maybe they can impart that onto 7th graders. Like, hey, like, I know, like, I get it, but maybe we could see it this way. So I feel like that would be the next step, is to kind of map out the 8th grade year, take on a 7th grade kind of buddy, but I'd have to coordinate that with the 8th grade ELA teacher. So yeah. Thank you guys.
Any other questions for Tony?
Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. Let's share some love for Tony and her presentation in the chat. That was awesome. I feel like your students are also walking away with a number of life skills that are going to serve them for the rest of their lives and not just through their school time. All right, let me transition us to close out. And please stay on so that you can be part of our raffle. I just want to give one final thanks to all of our amazing presenters tonight. Let's give it up for Amy, Edwin, Jason, Orlando, Shalea, and Tony. Y'all did an excellent job. Thank you so much for your hard work that you put in on your projects. I know that your projects have strengthened your schools and made your communities better. So thank you so much. And thank you to you all for joining us today. If you would like to hear more presentations, feel free to join us again tomorrow at the same time. You can RSVP using the same link that you did. It will be a different Zoom link, so be sure to join via that link, and it will be in your inbox 1 hour before the start of the webinar. Feel free to reach out and connect with our participants to learn more. Panelists, you guys can put your LinkedIn or your email in the chat at this time if you would like to, so that people can connect with you to learn more about your project and how they can support you in your future endeavors. If you have any ideas on how we can collaborate or fund projects in the future, feel free to reach out to me. I will drop my email in the chat. And then lastly, I'm going to be dropping a link to a survey in the chat right now. Please fill it out so that we can gather your feedback. We want to make sure that these presentations are impactful for you all as well and our community members. So please fill out the survey. And as you're filling out the survey, I'm going to pass it over to Kai for the most exciting part. She's going to be spinning a wheel for our raffle.
Yes, so on our screen, you will see the names of not SSP participants or staff members, but people who have joined us today from our various networks and communities. So to say thank you, we are going to be raffling off a few gift certificates. We're going to spin this wheel 3 times. If it lands on your name, it would be a huge help if you could put your email in the chat, whichever email you actually check, so that we can make sure you get your gift card. So for the first one, let's give it a spin. And Natasha S. Woo! Natasha S., if you could give us your best email in the chat, that would be helpful. 2 more spins, so there's still a chance if you weren't Natasha. Allie. This is the original Allie, not whoever else was impersonating Allie earlier. And then one last go around, keep your fingers crossed. And Tanya S., our final winner of a gift card. If you did not win today, definitely you can come tomorrow and be entered again. But those 3, Natasha, Tanya, and Allie, if you could make sure that we get your email for your Grubhub gift cards, we will get those sent out to you. Passing it back to you, Matt.
Thank you, Kai. I feel like you had like your Vanna White moment. Thank you all so much for being here this evening and supporting our second-year core members. And a final thank you to our core members who put together these projects. We would not be here without them. Thank you all so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Peace.